Welcome to Around the Weird. Here's your host, the museum curator of the strange and unusual, Mr. Nothing.
Thank you, mysterious voice, and welcome back to Around the Weird, a booktube channel where I talk about all the unusual and out of the ordinary literature that I have found in my travels. Today I want to talk about a comic book collection that I read back on that graphic novel grind. It focuses on earthquakes, plagues, and costume superheroes. I am referring to Batman No Man's Land Volume 1 by multiple authors and with art from multiple artists. The one that I can point out in particular is Bob Gale, who seems to have written most of these stories, with some stories by other well-known authors at the time. And this was all published in from 1999 to 2001. For those who don't know, Bob Gale is a comic book writer known for this, but also writing some other stuff for Marvel too. What's interesting is he's also a screenwriter, and it seems he had a hand in the Back to the Future trilogy, which is interesting. If it's the same Bob Gale, it might be a completely different Bob Gale, but this is the one that pops up. So it seems like, you know, some crossover between movies and comic books, which are interesting. But anyways, a whole bunch of other authors, not much else to say about them besides, you know, if you ever read this, look them all up. I do like the variety of authors. It's kind of similar to the Sandman series, and you get multiple depictions of Batman, multiple depictions of Gotham during this time of turmoil. I don't know much else about the No Man's Land comic, besides the fact that it ran for 2 years before they moved on to other stories, eventually talking about Batman's son, Bruce Wayne's son, and Hush and other similar stories like that, Infinite Crisis. This takes place shortly after somebody wrote The Long Halloween. Great series, definitely recommend checking that out. And this also comes, you know, around the same time they wrote Vengeance of Bane. So you have that also going on for Batman a couple of years earlier. So that's the context, and I hope it helps you understand where we're at in this story. But without further ado, let's talk about Volume 1 of No Man's Land. I will try to do a brief summary, a little bit of an analysis, and we will move on from there. So Volume 1 of No Man's Land begins by exploring Gotham City. There's a very interesting introduction where we're led to see an apple basically trading hands among multiple people in Gotham City while it's in peril, basically showing the value of that apple and what people are willing to give up for it. Anything ranging from guns to medicine to Penguin auctioning it off and going for quite a high price there. But Gotham City is clearly changed. It's under quarantine due to an earthquake, due to disease. The government isn't letting anyone in or out, but some people have remained behind, including Oracle, who has a gang of informants who are helping to tell her what's going on in Gotham. The police, who are acting as a gang themselves in order to gain more territory and hopefully force the criminals out. And you also see Huntress and Batgirl, like a different version of Batgirl other than Barbara Gordon, who is now Oracle. And you see Robin too, like they're all acting in some capacity, but Batman isn't there for some reason, because it seems he vanished once the earthquake destroyed Wayne Manor and left nothing, so it seems that he's trying to find himself or something like that. But again, the police are fighting like a gang. Commissioner Gordon is disillusioned with Batman because he vanished, and so he's trying to build up the Gotham Police Department, and they're behaving like a gang, even going so far as to do some executions of criminals in order to highlight that they're the main people to be dealt with now, which only forces more of the villains upon them because they're infringing upon other people's territory. One of those people is Scarface, who seems to have like an entire community under his thumb in one of Gotham's districts. But luckily, Batman shows back up and manages to defeat Scarface. But he quickly learns that the people aren't so ready to be freed, because some of them were like relying on Scarface to provide food and medicine, because many of the villains can't just hold the city hostage anymore. Like, they have to act differently in order to gain the support of the people. And so Batman realizes that he's in for quite a fight here. In another story, Scarecrow comes against Huntress as they're both currently situated in a church that has many refugees from the earthquake crisis, and Scarecrow is trying to bring down this church and the people within it. He doesn't have access to his fear gas or anything like that, so he's just relying on telling people that they should be scared and playing into those fears. But his plan is to tell everyone that Penguin is storing the guns in the church, which the priest doesn't want anyone to know about, and set a whole bunch of different parties against themselves, which initially works, but the crowd eventually turns against Scarecrow because they realize what he's doing, and the priest manages to convince him not to hurt Scarecrow. And so Scarecrow is pretty much without anything and ends up burning his suit before marching away to God only knows where. And Batman also reveals at this time that he has a base in Arkham, but we don't learn much more about that beyond that Batman has that base there. It kind of isn't explored in further detail. Batman also encounters the Penguin, who is forcing residents to fight against one another for the sake of betting and gambling. And Batman ends up beating Penguin up, and he has to run away, but not before gathering critical information from him. The police also seem to be making gains, but it's clear that Jim Gordon is in league with a major villain. It's not explicitly said who in this volume, but it's clear that Gordon is using this villain to enact violence against other people in order to allow the police to gain more territory. Batman also, in the process, helps Batwoman take down Black Mask, and in the process, Barbara Gordon sees that there's someone else acting as Batgirl, and she becomes quite saddened by the fact that Batman would let someone take her place so easily. It's a very interesting moment where she's like, "Those are my legs. Like, I don't have my legs anymore, and you're letting someone else take my legs." And so they take down Black Mask, and they send him to a prison, who I think is operated by either Deathstroke or Deadshot, one of the two. And Black Mask is killed in that prison. Don't understand why Batman is working with Deathstroke, but maybe that's explained in some other comic. You also see a bunch of Azrael stories, who you might have recognized took over for Batman in Vengeance of Bane, but now he's his own character in this story as part of the Bat family. And he comes up against Joker and in the process saves a child, although Joker manages to get away and act like a real jerk towards a whole bunch of other needy people during this great cataclysm that's taking place. Superman shows up as well, which you wonder, it's about time, and he attempts to help Gotham. He even empowers one of the citizens to go into the power plant and restart the power while cleaning up the power plant and making sure that it can operate. And Superman has to fight Freeze, but when he gets back to the power plant, he learns that the person he put in charge was sort of coerced into creating a sort of territorial type thing, where like I own the power plant and I can divvy out the power now. And Superman and Batman come into conflict here, where Batman's like, "I told you these people weren't ready to be saved," and Superman notes that he can't possibly help Gotham on its own. Although that doesn't make a lot of sense, and I'll talk more about that in the analysis section. But it is interesting how Superman's methods don't necessarily work here. And at the end of the story, we see Azrael fighting a skull-faced police type person named Alvin, saving Oracle in the process. And we also learn, if you haven't been keeping up with the previous comics, that Azrael and Oracle dated for a short term, but she broke it off. And we note that Azrael has kind of been changed, going from this murderous assassin who's ready to kill Bane to someone who thinks and arrests people and wants actual justice to be done. And that's where the story, volume 1 at least, ends there. In terms of analysis, I do think there's a fair bit to talk about here, especially with the idea of a forsaken city, a lost city left to the ravages of the destruction that has been happening to Gotham. You see scared citizens, people who are desperately want the government to intervene, but the government has long since decided to cordon off the city and say you're on your own. And like, has that ever historically happened? A city, being told to figure out the problems on their own, and seemingly the government doing very little, Katrina, to fix anything? I don't know. But you also see unsure police of how they're probably going to fix this issue. Whereas before, like even with the villains, like the Gotham PD knew how to fix a lot of problems. But here they're unsure. They're trying different methods, becoming even deadlier. Gordon is very frustrated with both Batman and with his own lack of ability in fixing this problem, which is something you saw in the Year One comic book, where Gordon was someone who liked knowing what the answer was and knew what was what. And when Batman shows up, that good versus evil sort of dichotomy gets thrown out the window. And here it happens even more, where there is no really good versus evil, because a lot of people have to do a whole bunch of seedy things to make life work in this new situation. The only problem with this is that I don't think the whole like seedy police, like terrible police actions thing is continued. Like maybe someone pointed out that saying the police were a bunch of murderers was maybe too political of a statement, but I wish they had explored that further in this volume. Maybe it'll be explored in the next volume, but it seems like it was just dropped here. And even the villains in this comic or this volume are different, because they can't hold the city hostage or demand that they get $1 million or they'll poison the reservoir, because the water's already bad, as Joker points out. Like, everything's already bad, and there's no mayor to hold hostage anymore. The government won't listen to you or are given to your demands, and the people will just fight back against you if you try to take anything from them. So the villains have to behave differently. They have to act like sort of mob bosses and give the people of Gotham what they need in order to gain their support. And so Batman realizes he's in for quite a struggle, because how do you compete with that? You can't simply beat people up anymore. Although Batman tries, you have to show that you're here to save the city in a positive light. I don't think Batman ever really realizes how to do that in this volume. Maybe in future volumes, but this one is kind of left in the air, that Batman seems to be really struggling. He can only really maintain the status quo and not really fix anything to a great degree. And that brings up a good question there. How do you help in this situation? It's clear that Batman's crime fighting isn't enough anymore, and he even goes to such lengths as showing up during the daytime to show that he is a presence in the city. But that's not enough, and it's not enough for what the police are doing, because that only leads to more violence in the city. And you would think the answer would be what Superman does, in that he flies in, he helps rebuild the power plant and puts someone who knows what they're doing in charge. And you would think that would be the answer. But these people are in such a primal territorial mindset that it doesn't really work at this point. That there needs to be something else in between that in order for that plan of Superman's to really work. I don't necessarily agree with that, which I'll talk more about later, but I do think it's an interesting sort of idea that Superman is not enough. There needs to be more, and I think the more is the government needs to step in and actually do its job, but it doesn't seem to be doing that here. And then there's the question of whether Gotham can be even repaired at all, which it seems like, at least in this volume, no. It's too far gone at this point. I think the police know that. I think Batman might believe that deep down, and even the villains know that, which is why it's their playground right now. But I do think that there's still that hope there that it can be saved if they can just find the way to save it. And all of this just relates back to Gotham being boiled down to its essence, where originally in the early Batman comics, you saw Batman taking on mob bosses who controlled parts of the city. And again, that's where Gotham is back to. It's territory that all that matters. You control this section of the city, you gain more, or you lose more and you lose face, and you become less authentic, I'm going to say, less legitimate in the eyes of the people. So all that matters is controlling that territory. Nothing else is important, which is why Batman and the Gotham PD spray paint to tag their territory, saying, "This is mine, you can't have it." And that's pretty sad for what Gotham is, essentially. You don't see that with other cities and comic books, how you take away the structure and it just devolves into complete and utter madness. It's kill or be killed. There is some hope, but in its essence, Gotham is nothing more than a rat-infested mess where the people are so broken down they can't unite and bring the city back to its former prosperity. Another interesting element of the story is the art. The art varies, as I mentioned in the beginning, based on the artist. You get sometimes more cartoonish, a delightful view into Two-Face, where he's more cartoonish than anything else, kind of like the Batman animated series from the 90s. You also get the Mosaic arc in this volume, where it's more gritty. It kind of reminded me of Arkham Asylum, A Serious House on a Serious Earth by Grant Morrison, and the art there was pretty phenomenal. And it reminded me of Mosaic, reminded me of that, which I was happy because I enjoyed that type of art style. And you get different interpretations of Batman and Joker and Azrael, which is always nice. Like I like how it breathes new life into the series. So if you get one interpretation of Batman for years, it could be pretty boring, at least from my perspective. So the varying art and the in-depth art at times, which you'll probably see me post around here, it really helps make this volume really a breath of fresh air. The main issue that I have with this series, this volume, is the messaging, which seems to be very individualistic in nature, sort of libertarian, like the individual matters over the state, and all you need is money, and the free market will allow the society to succeed, and all those kinds of dumb libertarian uber conservative messaging, where like Superman came in, but Superman is not enough to help. Like Superman is this all-powerful collectivist force where he makes everything better in society. But according to Batman, the people are not ready for that. They're not ready for this socialist kind of collectivist utopia where people help each other out and are like those who have the means and the knowledge are give that knowledge to the overall culture and are willing to help it. And the message that the government has abandoned Gotham City and the only people who can hope to save it are the costumed millionaires who fight crime, like that's very like libertarian in nature. Like maybe that's not the intent here, but that's how it comes across. Like Batman is the ultimate solution here, and he's clearly not, because the answer to this earthquake and the destruction of Gotham is not to beat up the people who are seeking help. Like, yeah, they're engaging in crime, but that's because they need to in order to get what they need to eat and get the medicine that they need and not die of starvation or thirst. And Batman isn't helping by beating these people up. Like, there needs to be more done. Like, Bruce Wayne could go back to Congress, even though he was laughed off the first time. He could go back. Like, if he truly wanted to help people, he could force Congress to listen to him. But it appears that like he was demoralized the first time he was laughed out of Congress, and so the only answer is to dress up and provide the solution yourself, which is a weird message and like not the answer. Like if in a case of being forsaken by a government and seeing like chaos unfold. It's not to, engage in more chaos and let only the most rich person be able to fix society. Anyway, those are my thoughts on No Man's Land Volume 1 by Bob Gale, among many others. If you have anything to say about what I said here in my review, feel free to comment below. I would love to hear from you. Let's have a discussion about No Man's Land. I'll try to read the next volume in the near future. Hopefully there's a satisfying conclusion and not some weird bonkers go nowhere plot that doesn't help anybody. Otherwise, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so that more people can find out about these writers and this particular comic series. And until then, I wish you the best of luck in your weird and earthquakey travels. Farewell.